sun shined in through the slightly parted curtains. The feel of warmth rays hit my face, causing me to stir awake. I glanced around the room I had grown familiar to, as clothes seemed to be scattered a bit across the floor, decorations making the room a bit more personal, and the soft covers I had just received last Christmas. It was a typical school day for me, except it wasn't. Excitement seemed to hit me almost right away, causing me to jump up from my place on my bed. Oh, on the bed. I rushed around my room, quickly getting dressed in my usual school uniform, making sure I threw on a pair of leggings underneath. I wasn't on for showing skin. As I got myself out together, so I looked decently acceptable, I ran towards my door, grabbing my backpack as I rushed out of the door. I was excited for today, except for the school day. Just the other day, my teacher had told me that she was taking a 3-day vacation this week, so she would be out. As much as my parents mentioned that I should stay home and learn with the work that she provided for me, I insisted that I attended my actual classes. So here I am, about to go off and finally attend Class 1A again. I've done it before, yes, but it was difficult for me to understand this class due to my impairment. So my parents decided, and I think I'm saying this right, AEP, for me to at the school. But that plan never satisfied that I couldn't attend a class with 1A. So I'm doing it today. Not only will I be attending a class, but Izuku mentioned that we're training today as well. So my luck is just perfect. So not only am I going to my actual class, but I'm seeing my boyfriend and doing some normal training. So basically jumping down the stairs, I looked around for any sign of my parents, but nothing. I zoomed over to the kitchen, grabbing an apple that sat in a fruit basket on the table. I put it in my mouth and began to rush to the door. As I did so, I felt my phone buzz, causing me to pick it up as I scanned over the text messages. Broccoli. Good morning, beautiful. I'll be there in 10 minutes, 5 if I run. I smiled at the text, the apple falling out of my mouth, causing me to reach my free hand up and catch it. I took a bite out of it, my eyes looking back to the text message as I began to message back. Just don't hurt yourself, I responded. Deciding it's best that I sit outside so I can see him come up, I double-checked that I had everything before walking over to the door. Opening it with ease, I walked out and closed it behind me, shaking it a bit back and forth to make sure it was fully closed. Seeing as it was good, I took out my keys that my mother thought would be good for me to have. I locked the door. Turning around, I sat down on the steps, continuing to bite into my apple, tasting its delicious flavor. I smiled joyfully to myself as I scrolled through my phone, eating my apple until I suddenly saw somebody's feet coming towards me. Out of a panic, I jumped up and faced the person who was approaching me, only to realize it was my handsome, green-haired boyfriend. Oh shit, sorry, my phone hit my... Waving to him, I held up the notepad, about to write to him, but he pushed it down, looking at me with a happy expression. As I was about to question him, he held up his hands up and began to sign to me, rather choppy. Good morning, he signed. His face looked at me nervous. As I stared at him, shocked, just as it became so nervously sweat, I nodded to him and dropped the notepad hanging around my neck, letting it drop to hit my chest. I raised my hands up and repeated his sign. Good morning, I signed back, and he smiled to me. Taking out his own notepad, the joint something down, handing it over to my way. That's all I've really learned, he confesses, causing me to let out a small laugh. I could tell it was quite or normal, as Izuku didn't flinch nor jump at the volume. He simply smiled at me as we both walked together towards the school, our hands that were close to each other somehow made their way to interlock with one another as we continued to walk. It felt nice to hold his warm hand in mine as we walked along the colder yet sunny day. Glancing over to him, I focused my brain towards his. So, what should I expect with this class? He glanced over towards me, probably knowing that I'm so sorry. That he heard my telepathic voice in his head. There's not much to worry about besides Kachan and Mineta. Kachan might yell at you, while Mineta might flirt with you, but at the same time, Mr. Aizawa is pretty intimidating as well. So he explains, and I nodded to him. Sounds like fun, I answered back, my eyes drifting ahead as I spotted a familiar dual color boy. Izuku seemed to spot him too, as I felt him shift, his free hand going up into the air as he waved. He must have shouted something as well, because Todoroki turned around, only to spot the two of us. Of course, Izuku and I's relationship wasn't a secret from the start due to its open talks about it. Everyone was cool with it though, as it didn't affect a whole lot, except brought Izuku and I closer to one another. It also seemed to bring me closer to 1A students as well, as I soon became friends with not only Uraraka and Ida, but Todoroki, Sue, Mirio, and some of the other students, who I've forgotten the names of. Reaching Todoroki, I gave him a smile, and he gave a small smile back, as he said something to Izuku. I tried to read his lips, but even after so many years, I couldn't. He didn't move his mouth as much as it would have helped me. So I just stood there and fiddled with my backpack straps. I could felt Izuku give me a small tug after a while, so I began to follow him once more. As we neared the school, I saw Todoroki handing me Izuku's little notepad he kept with himself, a small note written on the paper. You look rather excited, he stated on the paper, and I just nodded, my hands going up as I began to quickly write to him as we entered the school. I get to train with you guys today. He seemed rather shocked by my answer, but his face switched to an excitement as he gave a small smile along with a thumbs up. I gave a nod. Sorry, I was trying to think of my walking into the school and following Izuku. I didn't have to get anything from my locker, so I stayed with him as we maneuvered through the halls of the school. He held my hand still as we weaved through the crowd, but let go as I suddenly pushed away. I looked over to see Izuku, making his way over to me, but was stopped by when Ida and Uraraka jumped in front of him. I knew they had no clue that he was coming after me, so I didn't mind. But what I did mind, though, was the fact that I was getting pushed against the locker once more. It hadn't happened in quite a while ever since Izuku stood up to the bully last time, but they were back. Again. I just stared at them, rather irritated, as I felt my back hit against the locker, a feeling I grew familiar to. I looked at the one who held me against the locker, his mouth moving at me, clearly angry himself. I just rolled my eyes at him, dipping under the arm he had pushed against the locker next to my head. I exited his arm, but I tried to maneuver away. I felt a hand on my wrist. Looking back, I brought my free hand and quickly slapped the bully before reaching down and grabbing my book bag. Running off, I looked ahead of me to see Izuku coming towards me with Ida and Uraraka at his side. I smiled to them, giving a small wave as they stopped in place, looking at me rather confused. Looking to Izuku, I tapped into his mind, blocking out the minds that sat there as I thought of him. What? I tilted my head at him, walking up to his side. They seemed to say something to one another, but I didn't hear, of course. As they turned and we began to walk towards the class, Ida looked a bit panicked as he glanced down to his watch. I could watch Izuku looking to me as I stayed by his side. What happened to you back there? I thought those guys were back to get you again, he thought back, and I just smiled at him. Oh, they were, but I slapped the one who had me pinned down and I then ran. I explained, and he nodded. He began to walk up some of the stairs, passing by a few people listed doing so. As we kept walking up, I caught sight of a certain blonde-haired upperclassman, but his gaze didn't turn my way, so I passed it by. It kind of sucked not being able to talk to anyone or hold a conversation normally, but I guess it's my normal. I just felt excluded from some groups as they just spoke out. I mean, I could speak to people, yeah, but it was barely understandable as I didn't know if I was saying words properly, so I refused to speak. Are you okay? You look upset. I heard Izuku think to me. I looked over to him, riggering out my thoughts. As I gave him a smile, I nodded to him. Yeah, sorry. I was just deep in thought. I responded before leaning my head over to his shoulder. Even if we were walking, I let my head rest on his shoulder until we reached the door of the class. Looking in, I was surprised to see the amount of students that were there. They seemed directed enough with their own conversations to notice my new presence in the class again. But as I scanned across the classroom, I noticed a few people looking up towards me. Seeing Suyu looking up to me, I gave her a wave and she waved back with a smile. Leaning my head off of Izuku, I looked around the class again, a rush of nervousness filling me as I had never truly stayed in the class before. It felt weird, yet normal, as I looked over to Izuku, giving him a smile. So, where's the teacher? Before he could respond, I felt the floor vibrate a little, and I could tell that someone was walking towards down the hall. Turning around, I was faced with a long, black-haired, tired-looking man. As he looked into the classroom, I felt a little nervous as I jumped back and let him in. I recognized him instantly, though, to be Mr. Aizawa, as I remembered seeing him the first day. It seemed to take him a second to recognize who I was, but once I had a note from my pocket that my private teacher wrote to him, he nodded and gave me a tiny smile. He pointed towards the back of the class. Yes, I do realize there's no other seats in the class, but go with it or you'll sacrifice you to the Duck Lord. We'll sacrifice you to the Duck Lord, yes. Okay, I'm sorry. My eyes followed to see an open seat sitting in the very back. Turning around, I signed him a thank you before turning around and walking over to the seat. I could feel the eyes start to look at me now, as I could tell that a few people were making comments towards me. I didn't care too much though, as I sat in my seat, seeing as I was behind a black-haired girl with a few seats behind Izuku, seeing him peering back towards me. I gave him a smile and a thumbs up before I saw he snapped back around. Luckily, I had no introduction to do in the front of the class. Aizawa was seemingly to handle that. I saw his mouth move a bit before his hand gestured towards me. As he pointed back to me, I watched as all eyes turned on me. I slumped down in my chair a bit, nervous by all the stares before they turned back around. A few eyes still pinned on me as I watched Aizawa get to work on the first part of class. I got my special paperwork and began to work on that as I just waited for the training position. Finally. Oh shit, I was like, hey Ray, that was so loud. But finally, what I've been waiting for. We were taken to a special training facility that would allow us to openly use our quirks without damaging anything. I didn't know the name of what the place was called, as I never heard of it, but I just went along with it. Adjusting to my hero costume, I felt a bit more confident in it. I glanced over to Izuku, who was staring at me with a small pink dust on his cheeks. What, embarrassed to see me looking so good? I smirked as I commented to him, causing him to go a bit pinker/redder. No, I mean, you look good, but, no, he stuttered, causing me to slightly laugh at him. Looking down to my costume once more, I messed with him a bit. I didn't really wear it before, just once or twice. Just like the rest of the others, my costume was designed based on my design I had sent in, which wasn't the best of drawings, but they were interrupted. It was almost perfectly. The main part of my suit was a darker favorite color with the little ridges and sections forming the suit to fit me almost perfectly. The shoulders were either black or white and were a thinner material that allowed my telepathic magic to sped up. Like some other heroes, I needed a little bit of skin to show in order to use my telepathical powers. Oh, telepathic quirk, sorry. But I hated showing skin, so I resorted to a thinner fabric that allowed for my quirk to seep through. Without this suit, there were sections that just looked designs, but were actually the thin fabric once more, just colored so it matched the main part of the suit. The rest of it was just like any other normal super suit, with a belt-like waist strap, legging-like pants that were similar to the top, with a thin material at some parts, and a pair of combat boots that matched the shoulder area color. To top the suit off, I had a headpiece as well that shaped around my face to protect from all sides. Due to my disability, I added on a try to add an extra protective padding into the suit, allowing with maybe a modified hearing aid, but neither really happened. Yes, I got extra protection padding out into my suit, but not as much as I'd like, nor did I get the aids. But you can't always get what you ask for. Looking up to see All Might standing there, his voice retorting into vibrations to my feet. He seems cheerful and glad. I tapped over into Zuku's mind as I kept my eyes on All Might. What's he saying? That we're going to have a little competition against one another, sort of like the sports festival. Izuku replied the information on me, and I nodded. As I watched All Might draw up a board, I took notice that I wasn't on it, which sent a shock of disappointment through me. I was ready for nothing. Of course, he'd forgot about me. Oh, what do you want? I know I love you. I'm sorry. Willow decided to come up. It's been a while since Willow has decided to come up into my recording. Sorry, but she's now with me. Izuku seemed to notice this as I saw him raise his hand. As All Might looked to have called on him, I watched as Izuku said something to the tall man. He seemed a bit confused as he looked around until my eyes met with his, and his smile almost got bigger. It felt rather intimidating as he has turned back onto the board and wrote out my name. I looked to have a skip in the bracket as the spots were already evenly made up. Looking at it, I felt rather scared as I saw that I'd have to face either Izuku or a Tokiyami guy, determined on who wins. Glancing over to Izuku, he gave me a look of fright, as I could tell he was nervous as well. He promised me once that he'd never hurt me, but I guess that's not the case now. I gave him a reassuring smile, though. Don't worry, I'll kick your butt. Well, I don't want to hurt you. I shook my head at him. You won't hurt me. I'm a tough girl, remember? I'm sorry if you're a boy or trans or whatever. I'm sorry. I've been pushed into lockers and thrown downstairs before. He seemed to stay his nervousness self as he looked over towards the arena area. He gave All Might a look of determination as he walked off, giving me a small wave. I gave him a reassuring nod before looking over to All Might, seeing him standing there with a grin. Of course, I knew of Izuku's father-like son relationship he had with All Might, and the whole quirk thing as well. Izuku wasn't very secretive about some of that stuff. Plus, I've kind of tapped into his mind before on accident and found out, so seeing him look towards All Might made me happy for him a bit as I began to watch the fight go down between him and Tokiyami. It was a fast fight, only taking 8 minutes to get it done and over with, but it felt like it was taking hours as I just sat there and watched. As I continued to watch the fight go on, getting closer to my round, I felt a tap on my shoulder, causing me to look up to see Aizawa was standing there. Standing from my spot, I followed him out a little ways from the classmates. He turned to look at me. His cold, annoying look dropped a little as he raised his hand up. I was a bit confused as he looked like he let out a breath before his hand began to move. Catching on fast, I found out he was doing sign language. "Are you sure about this fight, kid?" I was a bit shocked by his choppy / fast-paced hand movements, but nevertheless, I understood it and gave him a nod. Understanding it, he shrugged and walked back over to the arena area, seeing as it was my turn. Looking over to All Might, he gave me a thumbs up as I walked past the cluttered together students, making my way to the arena. Getting there, I looked at Izuku, letting out a breath as I changed my mood, trying to get focused myself to become more aggressive. I stared down at him before glancing over to All Might. Seeing his hand go down, it signaled the fight was starting. Out of surprise, since I didn't hear anything, I pushed myself forward to look up and see Izuku coming my way. Taking advantage of his overly fast-paced run, I ran towards him before boosting myself up into the air. The red particles shined from my hands as I lifted myself up before turning around and landing with grace and ease. Just as I landed, I turned around and held out my hands. My fingers danced around a little as I held Izuku in the telepathic grasp, keeping him in place as I thought of a plan. Feeling him struggle and evenly break out of my grasp, I jumped into the air once more, seeing his attacks coming at me. I didn't want to hurt him, and from his attacks, I could tell he didn't want to hurt me as well, as he was only using much power. That makes 0 sense, but okay. Yes, I know. I will give you... Okay, fine. I'll give you pets now. Pushing that aside, though, I held my hand up again. The red danced from my fingers as I grab a hold of Izuku before throwing him towards the nearby building. He seemed to collapse, causing me to panic as I rushed over to his side, afraid I had done damage. I think this was posting. Seeing him move slightly, I froze. Looking at him curiously, he looked to me before stomping a foot on the ground, breaking it into pieces as it bounced the universe a bit, including me. I felt overwhelmed, letting out a silent scream, or at least it was silent to me, as I felt catching myself in the red magic. I looked back and shot a red energy pulse his way before creeping into his mind, forcing my mind on his. I swiveled into it, seeing some of his thoughts, messing with them. I began to make an illusion in his eyes, my hands growing rather hot as I let it shine bright with red, the illusion rather stronger, as I allowed for him to see whatever it was that would push him just a little. Not even realizing what I did, I felt my hands grow hotter until it felt like they were on fire. Snapping into reality, I looked at my hands, seeing it bent slightly to the right like it was broken. Glancing back to the teacher, I shook my hand before letting out cries. I could feel the vibrations of their footsteps as they came closer to me, feeling their hand on my shoulder. I was escorted out of the arena, having lost the battle due to my injuries, even if I clearly beat Izuku. Yes, I'm giving you pets.
Stop being a drama queen. I'm sorry about her. Time skip because it's 1 a.m. No, it's not. Not for me. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to break it. Izuku, chill. Recovery girl says it's just a minor sprain that should heal in a week or so. I explained, and he just shook his head, still trying to think. Oh my god, argue me over this. He kept thinking I'm sorry, while signing it as well, and holding out flowers for me. Shaking my head, I took the flowers and held them close to me before looking up to him. Smiling, I leaned up into my tippy toes and gave him a little kiss on the rip of his nose. He flushed red as he looked down at me. Keep blushing like that, and soon you'll match Kirishima's hair. I laughed a little before I felt a pair of lips collide with mine. Feeling myself relax, I melted into the kiss as I reached my free hand up to his face, cupping his cheek. I smiled into the kiss before pulling away and looking up at him. It was almost like the sparks appeared again as I looked into his beautiful green eyes, leaning up to him once more before I pulled away again and I took a step back. Even if it didn't sound back, I sucked in a breath before signing and talking out to him, I love you. He seemed to chuckle a bit, his face growing pink again as he planted a kiss on my forehead, his hands coming up as he signed back to me, I love you too.